Welcome to the Zoning Advisory Committee meeting of Hopkinton for Monday, February 4th. So we were going to start with review and approval of the minutes from January 22nd to get that out of the way while we're getting some documents ready. So, anyone have any amendments?
I have a small one. I got my hyphens, but my name changed to Barker Hood at the very end of the minutes this time.
Where was that?
At the very end,
The very end.
when I seconded approving the other minutes.
Okay. So,
Oh, there you are.
with that amendment, any other amendments?
Nope.
No. Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second,
All those in favor of approving minutes with the amendments? Aye. Opposed, abstentions, okay, all done. So tonight, we are gonna go through zoning district definitions, are kind of a process that I started with you guys at the last meeting. And then, you know, today, as you know, all the warrants were due for town meeting in May. So we are not working on any more possible zoning bylaw changes, amendments for this year. Everything that we work on now will be for next year or are associated with possible, you know, division rule change, subdivision rule changes and things like that that don't go through town meeting. So, okay, so now we're starting the longer planning things.
through the chair, could we get an update on what the planning board did with our recommendations? Was everything approved and
And the
sealed?
selectmen as well?
Yes, I'm not sure about the selectmen, but with the planning board, all of the warrants that went to them, they have decided to certainly put forward onto the warrant in preparation for the public hearing that planning board holds. At that public hearing, which is, trying to think, it's February 25th? Seem to think it's February 25th.
Yep.
But at that public hearing, after hearing the public's viewpoints, they may change wording and/or they can take things off the public, the warrant at that point. But that'll be the final decision for things that get, I think it then gets sent to the selectmen for a
And
final.
that's February
final
25th.
okay. February 25th, public hearing. So to support or not support the things that we put forward, February 25th in this room would be the place to go.
This room, okay.
I think it's also worth noting that there were some things added to the warrant that did not come through Zach.
Yeah,
That perhaps you might have an opinion on.
absolutely.
We chose not to go forward with the self-storage. That's going to the planning board as a citizen's petition.
There's two other citizens petitions that I'm aware of that went forward, but I don't know if they're going through the planning board or if they're going straight onto the warrant, because they can do either way.
There is also the,
other zoning citizens petitions that came in today.
Okay,
They get right on the warrant, but the planning board still has to hold a public hearing.
okay, so they will be part of the public hearing.
It won't be February 25th, it was too late to
Okay,
put on that.
to do that
So
one.
it'll be March.
Another public hearing later.
does that include the Legacy Farms change that I thought was going to go through the planning board?
The planning board put those on.
Okay, so that's also on there, that it was, we put through the changes to the senior housing, and Roy McDowell had a different perspective on that, and he wanted an opportunity to present an alternative to that, which he's going to put before the planning board, and is going to have a public hearing on the 25th, right, Elaine? That one?
I'm not sure, I haven't spoken to him about an alternate.
Okay, so he didn't follow up with the wording for the alternate?
If we're
Talked
talking
about
about a
that.
payment in lieu?
Payment in lieu?
Yes.
The planning board did include that as an alternative, so
Okay.
that will be on the public hearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so payment in lieu, and that was specifically related to the affordable housing units, and then the change in age, you know, that we had put forward was also the option of payment in lieu, so.
And maybe you want to give a quick synopsis of what Roy's looking for language to do in terms of his payment in lieu?
Okay, I don't know if there was an amount specified, but it was basically payment to our affordable housing fund. Is that right? Is that the right term?
Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Trust fund. In lieu of making some of the units affordable housing.
So, just to expound on that a little more, he felt that removing the no children clause would decrease his marketing, or not his necessarily, but the person who's selling those units, decrease their marketing ability. So instead of removing the no children clause, he wants to pay the town for the affordable units that he would not be putting in.
Does that mean we go back to the original wording?
We'd have to,
If that got approved,
we'd have to insert the payment in lieu.
It's an option, right, so there's multiple options. So the age restriction would still, yeah, so it wouldn't be applicable because there would be no units to apply to. So you'd leave in the restrictions on the age, but there would be no affordable units. They would pay instead of providing the units. So it's another,
Am I correct in assuming that Osmond bylaw refers only to that property?
Yes.
So that set of developments? Okay. So even though it's termed as, a potentially townwide thing, and it could potentially apply to another property in the future, but right now it only applies to that, right?
it can only apply to elsewhere if town meeting amends the bylaw like
Okay,
this is proposed.
right.
So right now it would not.
Okay, thank you. You still looked puzzled.
no, I just have one question. I'm entering my calendar. Is that a 7:30 meeting or 7, planning board?
7:30, I think.
Thanks.
What were the other citizen petitions?
Two of them are regulating growth. One of them regulating the number of building permits in subdivisions and garden apartments and village housing developments per year. And another one is a 1-year limit on growth. And I'd have to read through it again, but it's another growth limitation bylaw.
Is it commercial?
No, residential.
Residential.
Just residential?
Yeah, it just applies to residential.
And then the third is involved with, there's 2 citizen petitions relating to changing the Board of Selectmen to a select board. And so some of those changes, the wording changes, are in the zoning bylaw. So the other zoning change involves changing the term Board of Selectmen to select board.
But it has to go through planning board even though it's not,
Because it's a
because
change to the
it
zoning
affects some of
bylaw.
the wording. Okay, got it.
It doesn't affect zoning in any way, but those terms are used.
That's just a grammatical change, though, no
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
implications?
change of term.
The self-storage, the Roy McDowell, and 2 regulating growth, and then the thing about the select board versus selectmen.
And so
The
far, there's
Roy
still
is
another
not a
day.
citizen
And the
petition.
self-storage, did you?
Yeah, that was
That
the
was
first
Forgot that
one.
one. Okay, I'm sorry.
This is not.
There's still another day that the warrant is open, so there could be more.
Oh, another day? I thought it was today.
I think it's the 5th.
It's tomorrow.
They must have got the super.
Okay, so everyone out there watching tonight, you can write your citizen's petition and get it to Elaine tomorrow, if you like. Okay, good. All right, so, looking at the agenda. So first we'll discuss the zoning district definitions, and my goal tonight is, the matrix that I sent out was based on our discussion at our last meeting, and I'll go through that and how I organized it. And my goal tonight is that we finalize the matrix, and then at our next meeting, we all come with it filled out, and then we discuss what we filled out, the low, medium, high. Okay, so this is a business strategic planning method, and I just, I think it's a useful tool for us to use for this topic. And whether or not it leads to us changing definitions as written in the zoning bylaws, I think it'll help inform all of our discussions from here on, help define a common language, and make sure that we're all speaking in the same language when we make references to things. Okay. The additional items on the agenda, primarily brainstorming. Again, I'm not looking to finalize any wording changes right now, but these next 2, actually all 3 items, were part of the public suggestions at the beginning of our term. And so I'd like to brainstorm additional ways to encourage biotechnology businesses and brainstorm additional ways to protect open space. And there were 2 specific suggestions from people at the beginning of our term. And then talk about options for expedited permitting and what we see as the issues and what we can improve within our town. Lots of materials were distributed for this. I don't expect that everybody read everything and then reread it to try to understand it and so on. But I think this is just the start of that discussion, and it's going to be a longer term process. All right? Okay. So I'm going to move to the other computer so I can work on the matrix. Okay. And in the process of creating this matrix, out of our discussion at the last meeting, I also reread the economic development portion of the master plan, and the zoning bylaws is related to the non-residential zones, districts, to look for language, to look for definitions of the high value or lower value types of economic development in our town, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, the high value, it refers to high value pretty often in master plan, but it doesn't actually define high value in any way. So that's part of what we're doing for ourselves in this exercise. And I also did see, we had a long discussion about commercial, industrial, manufacturing, and kind of how those relate to one another. And commercial is used for pretty much in the master plan for pretty much anything in the non-residential segment. So basically we can't use it as a category because it's overarching. So these are some of the changes. Oops, I'm sorry. It does the opposite scrolling that I'm used to. Okay, so feel free to comment on, yes, go ahead.
I came up with a couple of categories right away after we left that were not part of our list, but should be. Automotive, like car dealership.
I did put that, I put down gas station auto repair, but.
Not the same.
Okay, so automotive sales and then automotive rental, would you like separately?
Well, so most towns define the difference between new and used automotive sales.
Okay.
And then there's another one, another category, which is landscaping.
Yes, and again, so I noticed that when I was reviewing on here. And I thought
Okay, so she's got that in there.
That's the
Okay.
landscaping business.
So then
Yeah,
there's
there is.
another one.
I'm going to add it at the end for now, so.
You know, apparently you did put it in there, but I didn't see it. Sawmills, communication systems, energy plants.
So the sawmills and the communication systems, sawmills, I noticed that they weren't in the industrial sector, they are in the agricultural sector. So
Yeah.
we can include them. I'm not saying not to, but I did see them and I thought that didn't make sense to include because they weren't even zoned within our industrial sectors right now, probably because of the noise, because of, a lot of it has to do with things happening inside a building rather than outside a building. And it seemed like, this is just my impression of the zoning, it seemed like the outdoor things that were generating noise outdoors or other, just activities outdoors were primarily in the agricultural districts and not in the industrial or business districts.
I think that they preceded zoning, so essentially
They were just grandfathered?
they were
into that?
grandfathered, yeah.
Sales, new, automotive sales, used. I noticed that we've allowed automotive rental, but not sales in our zoning bylaws right now. Sawmill. What were the others? Sawmills, you said?
Communication systems, and energy plants.
How, to me, how does communication systems differ from other, general business things up here? Manufacturing, assembly, processing.
We're talking cell tower?
Just a cell tower?
Well, I mean, we don't know what the communication systems are going to look like in the future.
Yeah.
But right
So,
now,
but you're
cell
talking
towers,
about facilities that that are simply for signals rather than,
In a
right.
Comcast business office? Which is what I thought of.
when I think communications, I also think of, telephone companies and internet and providers and.
It's a
all that
commercial
kind of
use,
things,
so it's something we have to define.
yeah. Okay.
And we have junkyard, hazardous waste facility, granite quarrying. There's a whole bunch of things that I'm not sure we've contemplated. But when we're looking at these industrial and commercial zones, we have to take into consideration
Sure.
that out of the blue, somebody could just show up and say, oh, I want to be here. Asphalt plant, oh my God.
Asphalt?
Asphalt plant, yes.
Yes, that would be fun.
Well, there are communities nearby that do have asphalt plants, and they're very popular.
So one of the things that I'd like to do today is see where we can combine things into a single category. If it's significantly different than other categories, absolutely, it should remain by itself, but where it can be combined, we should try to combine some, okay? But
Mary, that's because we're talking about the elements of each of these uses in your matrix.
Yeah.
Traffic, water, sewer, utilities, those things, right? Okay.
that's exactly right. I'm sorry, it's an older version of Excel, and I'm just not quite used to where everything is.
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for freeze panes of, the categories. I think would be under view. Freeze panes, there we go. Okay. All right. So, okay. I'm just going to go through the attributes across the top that I have thus far. These are high, we can rate high, medium, low. Well, I'll go through the ratings later. Contributions to the town. So these are, I don't want to say a positive, negative, but that's essentially what it means, is that these are the good things. It's better if they're high. So 1, tax revenue. 2, jobs. 3, the town image or contribution to town image. Quality of life, that can be defined a lot of different ways. And drives revenue to other businesses nearby or in town. Anything right off the bat that is missing?
Who employs town employees?
Say again?
Like, are they employing town people?
Are they bringing their workforce in from elsewhere?
Or
is
are
it
they
local
employing locally?
workforce?
Thank you, Carol.
You're welcome.
You can just
Jobs for local residents.
figure out my gibberish.
Do we know
You want to know that.
what industries employ residents versus non-residents?
Well, if it's a Colella's type thing, then it would obviously be more residentially employment-based, I think. Whereas if it's a biomedical place, I think they're coming in from out of town. I think it depends on the labor skill set
No,
required
why
for the
would
job.
biomedical be from out of town? There are a lot of people who are educated in that particular technology within this town.
So the reason why I bring this up is because we continue to have traffic coming through our town. And wouldn't it be nice if that traffic didn't have to come through our town, where we were actually employing more people
Right.
from our town. That's the reason why I bring it up.
Yeah, so essentially, we can also put in separate categories, jobs, just in terms of numbers that this business is
Right,
likely to
right.
bring relative to other businesses. And then jobs for residents versus non-residents, so, or proportion thereof, we can do it that way. Or we can try to combine it all in one category, which may be more difficult.
So, it's hard to assess that by at the genre level, like manufacturing, different manufacturing, which manufacture, based on what kind of manufacturing, it can come up to high or a low. So I would think that should be a criteria to give when we decide how much rating we give, we can, inherently, in our head, we can think about it. I don't know how we put it down. We can put it down there, but it's very confusing for me, because if I'm trying to figure out which of these categories would score high for local jobs.
Right.
And I can't decide, because there is, based on the company, like for instance, I know there is a technology company which literally said, like a word of mouth, I heard that they would rather like Hopkinton residents trying for the positions and stuff like that. Nobody knows that unless and until somebody has an in that company, and like it's not public knowledge, so it's very difficult to get a hold of that. So I don't know how to, I understand how important it is, but I don't know how to rate based on that.
Other than the fact that we know that the population in this town is highly educated, and it's all relative. It's all relative to other nearby towns or other communities in the state. So everything on this chart, it has to be relative. High, low, medium, relative to something else. And so jobs can be a matter of the number of jobs, it can be the matter of high-paying jobs, and it can be the matter of jobs to residents versus non-residents, So all we know about the population is what we know about the community on a statistical level. And that's, kind of age range. There's a lot of people in the workforce rather than retired, because we have a smaller proportion of retired people than other communities statewide, on average, and highly educated. And so that's pretty much what we go on. And that's the only way we can define it, okay? So all of this is just a feel for it, and by us being a cross-section, we're gonna, by a combination of our thoughts on this, we're going to come up with a reasonable expectation or belief about this. It is not designed to be precise, and so any of us who are analyticals are going to have a harder time with it, but that's how this process is designed to be. It's our best thoughts on it. That's what it is.
Is information available from the census, and I don't know how complete that is, but Hopkinton, I know, has a very diverse educational base as far as the workforce goes. And I'm just wondering if there's any way to kind of gauge how that falls between technical and, the different types of employment, and then also what types of employment people in this town are not finding employment. If we've got, a split of 20-20-60 going this way, but out of this little 20%, 95% of it is unemployed and struggling to get by, then I think it would be nice if we could address that, but I don't know if there's any way to get that information.
So certainly unemployment rate is very current. Those usually come out very often. The federal census data has information on what industries residents work in and where they work. Not necessarily correlated, but we know how many people work in Hopkinton versus don't, and we know what industries residents are employed in. But that's every 10 years, so we know the last census, and they do estimates periodically, so we can get some recent, within the last couple of years, we can get some estimates of what industries people work in, who are residents, and where they work, I hope. We can look into that.
I think.
Well,
I
that
think
would be really helpful
yeah.
for that particular.
That piece of it, yeah. Okay.
Thank
So
you.
just going through the other attributes. I put this category as resource use. And traffic is essentially a use of not only the roads, but time and things like that. So and some other things. But I think that when we were talking about some of the types of businesses, there's a big difference between rush hour traffic, off-peak traffic, and then truck traffic. So that's why I put them in 3 separate categories. But then there's water use, sewer use, utilities, police, fire, other town services, and I was wondering if there's other things that you would think of as resource usage or potentially negative.
Parking.
Parking. Oh, my God. And noise isn't a resource use, but it's,
Yeah, put
I
down
don't know
noise.
how to put it
Noise
there.
is an issue for some
Or-
uses.
it could be pollution.
I was thinking
Say
environmental
pollution, we
impact
could
of
put noise and
some
pollution.
category. I don't know for sure if noise is part of environmental impact or not, but
It is, but
I certainly think noise is
Helpful
worth
if it was more
considering. I just don't know if
more
it's in the same.
specific.
Do you want noise separate?
I don't know.
I think noise should be separate, yeah.
I do too.
Okay, okay. So,
Thank you for
And-
putting that together, Mary, because that's a really good start to figuring out how we as a town view these uses, or at least this committee, in terms of setting these things in different zoning.
and
areas.
I also want to stress that if we don't feel comfortable that we have the attributes and the categories right tonight, we shouldn't go off and rate them yet. So we should spend the time to make sure we feel comfortable that the attributes are complete and the categories also are complete, and appropriately explained, because we can give more explanation in each category. The bylaws had a lot of explanation in each one, and I truncated a lot of it. But only then should we go off and do our individual ratings and then come back together. Because if we do it prematurely, it solidifies the impressions in our mind a little bit too soon, you know?
Then I think we ought to break jobs into separate categories before going further.
And I'm still looking for the insert row, insert column. Where is it?
Try right click.
Oh, here we go, insert.
I don't know how to do Excel at all.
Job
Dude,
number.
but I've got 4 different,
Versions of it?
yeah, and one of them's here and one of it's clicking and.
Okay,
I think I'd say skills. If we can assume that high skill is high pay,
high skills, high pay, okay, good.
I think that's probably a safe assumption.
And then it's the local versus non-local, right? Okay. Any other thoughts on attributes at this moment?
So can I just, because I think the jobs is important, so I just want to wrap my head around what we just did.
Sure.
If we got a new supermarket, say, and I don't know how to run a supermarket any more than I do a
Sure.
storage or a car wash, I imagine that's a pretty good number of jobs. I would guess, for the most part, low skill, and I would guess local, because there's a lot of high school kids or retirees that go to the supermarket. Is that the way we're looking at these categories?
I do, because my son was this youngest kid at Price Chopper when they first opened.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Congratulations. to him.
So
And
he-
now he's general manager.
No, he's off to college, but the point is that they made, a very special effort to train him in the store, and it was a great experience.
Right.
And Colello's used to do the same thing. They employed so many of the
Yeah.
Kids.
school kids.
I just wanted to make sure I was thinking it
Right.
through correctly.
Yeah.
that
So,
that's what we're looking at.
and that's a good example, is like, and town image, you'd say it's probably, I don't know, medium?
I think it depends on what the supermarket is.
No, could
I
be.
think a Whole Foods is one thing, and
Yeah, quality of life.
I don't know. I don't want to
obviously.
pick on a supermarket.
No, but
A
that,
non-Whole Foods is less.
you know, that could be a question mark, that could be depending on, you know, quality of life, you know, that could be, you know, it's higher because we don't have to travel as far for groceries. That could be a rationale that, for somebody to put high. But some other people may say, you know, but it, you know.
More traffic.
It's more traffic and, or it
It's more
affects my
pavement,
neighborhood.
more parking lot, or maybe that's in the environmental section, but there's probably overlap between a
Well,
lot of
quality
categories.
of life is a, you know, positive, negative thing, because it's so ambiguous.
Yeah, it can be neutral though.
Yeah, it can be. So you can also, you can leave it blank, or you can say it's medium because it's really neutral compared to the other categories we're talking about, so. Traffic, you know, would be, you know, probably high. This is, oh my goodness.
Wow.
So Mary, I think a lot of people consider this, the Price Chopper to be a major boost in services.
Yeah,
Because even if they don't do their big shop there, they use it as a convenience store. It's a service that really does add to the quality of our
Yeah.
life, because we were without anything.
and this is a perfect
Substantial.
example of the discussion that we'd have on each topic, you know, because everybody's gonna come in with their own views, but then we can justify and come to a consensus on.
Right.
Okay, so, you know, quality of life high for that particular thing. That's exactly.
But statistically, a lot of
No, I
communities
know.
say that a supermarket is critical for high quality of life.
And yeah, and I think that was reflected
The
in
fact
the
that we
master plan.
got the only supermarket that wanted to sign up at the bottom of the market, we got what we got.
But it's still a nice supermarket.
To
Yes.
keep the supermarket example, I think Colella's, was in some financial trouble before Price Chopper. But
They were.
Price Chopper might have been nails in the coffin, so we exchanged one for the other. And I'm not quite sure how that's represented up there.
You know, we still have room for a local market as we had Water Fresh. And, you know, it's,
I don't want to dwell on the Price
Yeah,
Chopper,
yeah,
just
yeah, no, but
using it as an example of where we're looking at quality of life. I like having a
right,
supermarket.
right. I mean, we're a sprawled out community that we could actually have two, because Price Chopper's on one side of the community. So it's one of those things where, again, it's all about services to the town.
Right.
If you can't get to that market because there's all this traffic at rush hour going to South Street, you're not gonna go there.
Right. So, but that brought up a point, is that something else in the other attributes is competes with other town businesses, you know?
Which is,
So
I think, is the flip side to the
Yeah.
drives revenues too.
I think it needs to be
There's
included.
takes revenues from others,
Yeah,
or existing, or something.
okay.
I think we have supermarkets in the Osmond, do we not? Because we thought about that in terms of,
It's in there.
I think it's a small.
You're talking about the Legacy Farms, Esmond?
yeah.
Okay, yes. Elaine, you and I discussed this.
Did we?
Yes, way back when we were talking about the fact that you thought that Western Nurseries would be sort of an anchor, and then would be a village type of area to develop like a supermarket. The problem is that the
I remember that plan
supermarkets.
once.
Huh?
I remember seeing that kind of plan once.
Well, the problem is that the markets don't feel like they can get enough sales there, because it's a one-way road. I mean, you know, it's like not enough traffic,
So
so.
it's retail, it allows retail, it doesn't identify what
Okay.
kind.
But does the retail allow for like 20,000 square foot box? That was yeah. Where we don't really allow that in most
There's a
places,
size limit.
yeah.
No, because we had a lot of discussion over what could go in there
Right, so,
and whether or not it was going to compete with the other local stuff, or whether it was far enough to be its own little draw. We spent a lot of time on that way back when, in the dark ages.
Okay, is there anything else, again, that people think of for the top attributes? I'm calling them attributes.
I think those.
Right now? Okay.
Can I just ask a question in terms of You've labeled this an economic development matrix. And in reading through the master plan, there are very distinct portions there that says economic development is distinct and separate from zoning.
Okay.
And I'm looking at page 47 that says these are very different things. So is this supposed to be a zoning document or an economic development document? And if it's economic development, I'm confused as to what our role is in economic development as opposed to zoning.
Well, I think there's a lot of linkage and overlap. I read that section too. Although I don't have it in front of me at the moment.
You want me to read this
Yeah,
section?
that would be
Yeah.
great, that particular paragraph.
So an important challenge for Hopkinton is recognizing the difference between economic development and commercial and industrial zoning. Economic development is about building a durable local economy that improves the quality of life for people in a community or a region. Commercial and industrial zoning is an essential tool for economic development and tax-based expansion, but on its own, zoning does not build an economy. So it's saying these are very different things. Zoning, if I look at objective definitions of zoning that I've pulled off of the internet, zoning is to make sure that we have like things in certain areas.
And yeah, I think that this is primarily for zoning,
47.
but the only reason I put in academic development is because I think that it could have, not direct effects, but it could lead us to places that are outside of zoning, that we make recommendations possibly to other aspects of town government. That's the only reason. I think the reason we're doing this is primarily for zoning and for understanding how to organize our zones and perhaps revisit how they're originally put together and why they were put together. So, that I do think that it's primarily for zoning.
Okay, the titling just confused
I'm
me.
fine with changing the name. I just, yeah, whatever people feel comfortable with.
So what your goal here is, these are permitted uses in the various zones? Is that what you're looking for?
These are not all permitted uses right now.
These are
But
possible.
These are possible permitted uses.
So it's not an economic development matrix, it's a permitted uses matrix? I'm being thrown off by the descriptor.
And I have no problem titling it anything we want to title it. That is a better description for this. So I think it's primarily for zoning purposes and permitted uses that we're looking at this.
Can I suggest that we just take off economic development and make it matrix of business categories?
Sure. Because this is, the only thing that seems to be defining it is that it's non-residential. And that, because that's what we're focusing on. We're not.
So this
we're not
is for
looking at the
all other
residential.
zones other than residential?
Yes.
Maybe we should make it non-residential.
And agricultural?
It was,
We run into John's favorite topic again.
I know, because agricultural is mainly residential, but it is, I didn't put farming uses on here. We can if we want to. We can include the agricultural pieces.
Farm with or without livestock or fowl, greenhouse with retail sales, greenhouse with wholesale only, livestock or fowl, roadside stand, temporary or permanent. Those are your agricultural uses.
If you put fowl on there, you're gonna have to add smell on the top.
Okay, I'll add those.
I can give this to you, Mary.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah.
I've just taken one town's use regulation schedule. All the uses are on here. This is how this town
Well, and
has
those,
defined it.
that wording was exactly in our bylaws too,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, but that's great.
So-
If you can send it to me, that's fine.
So the reason why we're doing this entire experiment is because I thought that the conversation was, we're trying to build reason for economic development in town through zoning. That was what came up a few weeks ago. And we keep like twitching, the zoning to allow for different uses, but the zone doesn't reflect those uses. So I'm just bringing Ron back to square one on why we're doing this, because it is ultimately, if we have some kind of a roadmap for companies coming here, it's going to be easier for them to come here. Because right now, it's a free-for-all. And every time we change one use in a zone, the zone doesn't reflect what those uses are anymore. So that's why we're doing this.
Right, I agree.
And I'm keep coming back to the master plan and trying to say, how is zoning helping us to execute the master plan? And I think my opinion is this: we're putting the cart before the horse until we. I'm not sure that this is advancing us closer to the master plan by doing this exercise. Maybe it is.
What would be, in the way you're looking at it, what would be before this step then?
Well, I mean, when I see land use goals and economic development goals, which are the non-residential goals of the master plan, maintaining zoning regulations that reflect the town's wishes for commercial growth and development. How is this?
That's exactly what the purpose of this is.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the way I see it, is, I was using the master plan as a guide for this step. And again, looking at it from, where we've been, is that instead of or before looking at additional changes to individual bylaws, let's look at the big picture of how the zones are laid out and make sure they make sense, and then make sure, the zoning bylaws are organized in such a way that businesses that want to come in can actually read them and understand them easily and things like that. So that's the way I see it, is that line that you read out of the master plan is helping us to better define our zones.
Yeah.
And be consistent within them.
The other thing that I would just offer is I think that downtown business and rural business are different than the industrial zoning. And we may want to address them differently, because as I was sitting in the Muffin House this morning, looking out at our 2 drugstores, 2 gas stations in the center of town, and vacant buildings up and down Main Street, it's like, that's an urgent need for us to do something to, and I don't know if zoning can help change that. Maybe that's purely economic
It
development.
might not be. The way I see that we're going to come out with this, we're going to see there's different ways to use this in business, is that sometimes you're looking at perhaps different industries to get into, that are strategically similar to the industry that you're in, or things like that. That there's the high, medium, low is done on a number scale, and then you can add up things at the end. That just then ranks the things in the rows, ranks the categories as, okay, this is the most desirable, and so on. In our case, we don't want to look at what's the most desirable necessarily. We want to look at what's the profile. And the profile, okay, these all have highs in this category, so all of those things should theoretically be together. And so, does that make sense? The industrial A zone has all of these that have the same pattern of highs, mediums, and lows. And by that, by having retail on here and entertainment and things like that may be more appropriate in our business districts, hopefully we'll see that the patterns that we come out with are also the same in grouping those business types together. So theoretically, again, by doing this step by step, we will come to a pattern, and then we may see that, gee, this business belongs in this district, it looks like, from our patterns and from having similar businesses together and similar types of types of traffic flows and things like that. And that's not the way our zoning is. So that's a potential change. So, but it also could drive some of the other economic development aspects of, we need somebody on staff who's specifically associated with this and is an ombudsman type of person. You know, that might be something too. And that has been mentioned in the master plan as a suggestion. So I don't know where we stand on that, but that may certainly lead to some of those conclusions as well. Make any sense?
Absolutely. Mary, I really like doing this step because I think it is illuminating, and it is a place where we can see where the town has been and the zoning and where we think we're going.
Right.
And at least get that direction going in the right direction.
And we need to think about business categories, you know, biotechnology is the
Right.
good example of it, that we haven't thought of yet. So that's homework for everybody to be really thinking about, did we forget a whole sector here? And that we should be thinking about attracting. Okay. So.
Does it make sense to add a column, belongs in district, whatever?
Yeah, that can be the, like a first impression for each of us to put.
Oh, that's a great idea.
So, but I don't want it to guide your whole filling this out, is that, you first decide what district it's in, and then go back to the profile. I think it should be the other way, okay.
So we don't have to have our names on these pieces of paper. We can just send it in.
That's right. And actually,
Put it in the hat.
I'm going to send this to Elise too and see if she can, she has time to do it and send it to us. So belongs in district, first impression. Because, your first impressions might not be what our profile shows us. Okay. So some of the categories, you can see some of the changes that I made in terms of how I grouped things together. Some of this was based on the zoning bylaws and how they're written now, but if you have other examples from other towns or past experience or anything like that, feel free. I just think we're gonna get in trouble if we have 200 categories, and 40 or 50 would be best to keep it down to, okay? So manufacturing, assembly, processing. And yes, I know that can be so many different things in so many different industries, and we may find that, it depends, and every single category we're saying it depends if it's, this or that. But think about that. Think about how we need to divide that if necessary. Warehousing and distribution. Again, because that's a lot of square footage with fewer employees. I wanted that separate from manufacturing, okay? That's just the footprint aspect of it. Laboratory and research centers. Sorry. Office, the general office category. And that to me would include a legal office, because that doesn't generate a huge ton of traffic, even though you might be having clients coming in or out, but would be different than, say, a medical, dental, chiropractic office, which is probably a little bit higher level of traffic than a legal office. In our zoning bylaws, there's a difference between medical facility and medical offices. Unless we're talking about a hospital, I don't think that the type of medical facility, small inpatient activities of a medical office or a dental office or so on, I think, and even there's biomedical laboratories would be up in a laboratory, in my opinion. But I don't think we're talking about hospitals in this town. We could have a category for hospitals that are different, but...
Ambulatory care.
But
What about the 24-hour healthcare?
24-hour, we could put that separate. But, okay.
And I don't know generally if the traffic or...
Yeah, urgent care centers
Yeah.
versus medical, dental, chiropractic offices.
Other than it's 24 hours, or not necessarily 24 hours, but extended hours.
Right.
Wouldn't operate on the same schedule.
But the differences would be pretty minimal, even, yeah, just
True.
the hours.
The current definition is focusing on outpatient services.
Right, which medical and dental offices do,
Right.
you know? That's what the outpatient service is.
So an urgent care would fit into that.
Yeah, the only difference would be that the hours, potentially. But that could be defined specifically in zoning bylaws and probably is. But other than that, I don't, unless we want to put a category of hospital, or hospitals and clinics for inpatient services. Should we have that
We should have
category?
that category, yeah. I mean, it's a commercial category.
So, is it, you're including uses that aren't necessarily allowed here
Yes.
at the present time? So this list could get quite lengthy.
Yes, it could. And one of the reasons that I left hospitals off is because I didn't think that that was a highly likely occurrence for our town. And so if it gets incredibly lengthy, we might want to consider.
But here's the
Property
point.
would be great for a rehab type.
Well, I was gonna say that, you know, Milford Hospital is one of the best hospitals financially in the community, and if they wanted to do a sister location here, it would be great. We would embrace it, wouldn't we?
I think so.
Okay, good, because it's not currently a use. That's a good example. I actually think we should have just one column that says currently allowed, not allowed.
Yeah.
We don't even need a red way, yeah. Okay, so daycare, I thought that was unique enough that I left it by itself. There's just so many things about it, you know, there's an outdoor component, there's, you know, the traffic, the, you know, other special needs of the daycare. Funeral home, building trade shop, which is defined in our bylaws pretty clearly. Okay, so hospitals, clinics, including inpatient services, and then the health services that's outpatient only. I'll just add that, okay.
How about animal hospital?
Yeah, it's on there a little bit
Okay.
lower.
I assume that's a veterinary office.
Yep. Landscaping business, and that, again, is defined in our bylaws and includes it defines it as the staging area, basically. Obviously, landscaping happens on site elsewhere, but it's the staging area where the equipment is stored and supplies and so on.
What about like nursery or greenhouse?
So I'll add that. I think that was part of the
I
agricultural.
mean, that's part of our
zone.
agricultural, but, I mean,
Oh.
the greenhouses is like a retail use now,
Yeah, it is,
It's considered an agricultural use though under the,
but
under our
yeah.
bylaw, but
under the,
Okay, and service businesses, other than what, you know, falls in some of the more specific categories.
right.
Although there was an interesting, I think was in our bylaws or the master plan, it had something to do with retail service versus retail sales. I thought that was an interesting way to define it. So
Retail service is like a hair salon, and retail sales is a women's clothing store. Just for an example.
What is Mary Maids?
What's Mary Maids?
Yeah, what would that
It's a
qualify?
service.
So that would be a service. With business taking,
But it really is not a retail service. It's because they're not doing something at this
right,
location. They're
right.
going to
So
another,
but they would
Yeah.
need office space.
they're an office use.
I'm sorry, I was typing. What did you say?
Mary Maids.
Mary Maids or that type of.
yeah.
When
Yeah,
I heard retail service, I jumped to that right away.
And I don't, because I think of that as the location that they have their offices at, all
Right.
they do is office stuff. So that would just be a general office, because the service that they provide doesn't happen on site, because it doesn't drive traffic to that site. That's, again, the way.
I wasn't trying to correct anything.
No,
I was
no,
just
I'm just
curious
saying.
what that qualified as, because it popped into my head.
Yeah. So that's how I would define it. I mean, if I were, trying to think of an example of those.
It's got its different kind of traffic, doesn't it? Driving those little yellow cars back.
That's right. Okay, so I put in retail service, retail sales, non-food, and then retail food markets. Any other categories that we need under that? Oops, scrolling the wrong direction again. Okay.
Is alcohol included in one of those?
It'll be retail.
Retail sales.
That counts as sales, non-food?
Yep.
Yeah, is it food or non-food?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, if you
I
think,
think it's food too.
I'm not sure that you have to put retail sales non-food. It just says retail sales.
Well, yeah, but then you want to make sure that you're not saying, I meant supermarket. Because retail sales includes
Beverages.
markets. That's what I'm saying. It's just to
Right.
differentiate it from line 16.
Right, and the reason why you would put supermarket down is because of the square footage. Do you see what I'm saying?
So what would you say? Food markets?
So, you know what, I do like blast emails and I do anything under 10,000 square feet and anything over 10,000 square feet as a defining factor on literally how much traffic they're gonna generate to a site.
Well, you see, I think of the traffic, again, defining the traffic differences, a women's clothing store versus a food market. Big traffic differences, to
Right.
me, and parking needs differences, yeah. So, but not necessarily just square footage difference, you know what I mean?
Well, that's how many people can go in the building.
Yeah, I know that, but how many people will go in the building?
Well,
A small grocery store and the same size boutique are gonna generate a lot of different traffic amounts. That's my view. Because the
I mean, a
food
Cumberland
market,
Farms and a bridal shop are two very different things that could be exactly the same size.
that's just, again, my bias of how I was thinking about it, is that I thought food was fundamentally different in the traffic flow than other retail sales. I could be wrong. Okay, entertainment, recreation, sports, health club. If you want things separated from that, our bylaws currently define health club or gym separate from recreational uses.
Right.
I don't know why.
So
because
I just
to me,
went to Apex for the first time, and it was a horrifying experience.
Hallelujah.
And since I think that's what we mean by recreation a lot, I think having taken my son to BSC several times and experienced what I did on Saturday at Apex, those are two wholly different parking situations, wholly different traffic situations. And if that's what recreation means, that needs to be separate. I probably pushed to put them together before, but now I understand what Apex is.
What is Apex?
Oh my, it's a nightmare on top of a nightmare. It's lights and sounds and flashing and unhealthy food and cars forever and ever.
It's bowling,
It's pins.
go-karts, and
It's
axe
pins
throwing.
on steroids multiplied 100 times. It's unbelievable. It's
It looks like an airport parking lot.
a jolt to the senses.
Parking space in front of this
Yeah, but
building.
it does.
Sounds like a.
All I'm saying is it's very different from a health club. I'm not voting for or against an Apex coming to town. I'm just saying it's a different creature.
Speaking to that point, because we have retail split down into so many, like at the macro level, maybe entertainment and recreation also, it needs to be clarified a little bit down to the level of what do you mean by or I don't know, indoor recreation versus concert halls versus theaters, because all three in my head will have different ratings for different things. So
And then you gotta do one more, outdoor recreation. Outdoor recreation.
Yep.
So just like a thought, like we are assuming, I understand Apex is a worst case scenario, but that's not the only indoor recreation choices. There are laser zone, sky zone, which is indoor recreation, which is contained. So it's not always the worst case scenario. So sometimes it's just because Apex is right now a shining beacon of light. It's attracting our eye there. So
It totally is. Okay. So entertainment includes like the theaters and.
Billiards, bowling.
That wouldn't be indoor recreation? See, that's what I would call indoor recreation. Bowling and billiards would be indoor recreation, but
Well,
theaters and
Well, yeah, I
clubs
guess,
and-
yeah,
concert halls, do they?
concert halls, okay.
Okay.
And-
Okay, then, restaurants, hotels, inns and B&Bs, which I did find in the zoning bylaws, are defined differently than hotels. These are up to 12. To 12 rooms. Okay. Places of assembly or worship. Educational facilities. Charity, philanthropic organization. Again, might not be necessary to categorize separately because, there, a lot of it is, for instance, Project Just Because, it's kind of a combination of warehouse and office space, right? So we could just categorize it in with the warehouse and office space.
Whereas Doctors Without Borders would be office, pretty
Yeah, it
clearly.
would be an office, right. So it doesn't have to be separated unless it affects one of these categories, and
Well, it affects your tax revenue, right?
yeah, so there you go. Museum, car wash, gas station, auto repair. They're separate in the zoning bylaws. I don't know if they need to be on our list, just, open for,
Sorry, just can museum and art galleries be combined together?
See, I think of art gallery as a retail use.
oh,
Museum is a different kind of a thing. It's normally a non-for-profit. It's got
so it would be
specific hours.
percentage of, yeah, so museum or gallery with, just a gift shop is different than an art shop that's set up for sales, everything in there is for sale.
I just think of an art gallery as a retail use, a general retail use.
The place you go to buy art.
Right.
Unless it's the Museum of Fine Arts, which is just a gallery with a gift shop
Right.
in the lobby.
No,
Isn't that a
the-
museum though?
It's museum.
Museum of Fine Arts.
No, but my problem is if we put, say, art gallery in a retail space, retail in general has high traffic, but art gallery by itself does not have as high a traffic as other retail would. So putting it in retail brings down its value for me.
Yeah, like an antique shop.
Yeah.
That's kind of low traffic.
Yeah. So
That's a good example.
So-
too.
To the other point though, so is a bridal shop and I don't think we can break our retail down into
Into all
every
the different
possible
types of
retail
Right.
use.
That's,
That's true.
Starts to get very, we're gonna have way too many categories as it is if we start.
Okay.
so we think the reason why gas station and auto repair are two different items in our zoning bylaw is that the gas station requires being in a high-traffic location for constant traffic, whereas an auto repair shop can be in a separate area, doesn't require easy access to the pumps.
Gas stations too require underground
Yeah,
tanks.
I think that's the reason why it's in two separate categories in our bylaws.
I wonder if there's a sound difference too. And a body shop, I would guess, is different from an oil change specialist. I would guess, if it came to sound considerations. But maybe nobody bangs out dents in it anymore because everything's fiberglass, so maybe not. I don't know.
So auto repair and like lube shop would be probably in a similar place. Okay, you can say maintenance. Thank you.
And our self-storage facility is here. And again, I don't think that fits in other categories very well because of some of the things that you guys discussed during our discussion on that topic. I have dog daycare, animal shelter, animal boarding, and veterinary office.
I think doggy daycare and animal boarding are the same thing.
Well, in our bylaws, they aren't, because it says daycare, no overnight boarding.
But we can have daycare in neighborhoods, right?
By special permit.
Okay? So
Would
that's why I put them
And
separate.
a certain number of dogs.
Otherwise, I would have
And a
agreed
couple
with you
years ago, we
completely.
did that.
But
And then veterinarian office
veterinary office, yeah.
oftentimes does animal
Oftentimes,
boarding.
yeah. Oftentimes does.
Is a veterinary office different from a veterinary hospital?
No, same thing to me. Conference center, recycling center. They're not next to each other because they are related. It's just the order in which.
They were added in, right.
Automotive sales, new, used, automotive rental, and Sawmills communication systems, energy plants, hazardous waste, granite quarry,
These are great ones, huh?
asphalt plant. I need to add the
Right,
business,
Flintstone.
the agricultural uses from our agricultural zoning, and any other lists that you guys provide.
What would the butcher shop be under in this one?
Supermarket.
Yeah.
Retail food?
Retail food, yeah.
Are they, I was just talking to my daughter, are they still bringing in live animals and making them not live there? Or do they just get dead
What,
animals and
arena?
cut them up smaller?
Arena, you
arenas.
talking? I think they're still making them not live animals.
Because there might be, if that's true, and I don't live in that neighborhood, there might be different sound considerations than a regular old butcher shop then. If we actually have an active slaughterhouse,
Ash Street, we do slaughterhouse.
because it might be worthy of two different things. Those are two, I would guess,
Slaughterhouse.
different experiences for a neighbor.
Okay, just add in another category.
Slaughterhouse.
I have never heard of any noise complaints coming from over there, but
No, I've heard like a couple of pigs came out running on the road and stuff like that from that place. So
and it was
They made a run for it?
yeah, the people
they
have
win?
spotted
Did they get
they
I'm rooting for the
crossing
pigs.
the road and
I'm thinking that we all need to look at this and think about it more before we do any ratings on it, okay? So let's use this time, obviously send this modified version. I mean, Elaine will, because I don't know how to do it on this computer, to send it back to us. And we'll discuss it one more time at the next meeting. It's March? It's in March, yeah. Our next
March
meeting in
4th.
March. Before we go to the rating point, okay? So let's do that. And let's move on to another topic. What's next? Because I think I'm gonna just use use this.
Brainstorming biotech businesses.
Okay. So brainstorming about how to encourage biotech businesses.
Can I ask why we're looking just for biotech businesses?
Because it has been suggested to us by the public.
By who?
I don't remember, somebody at the beginning, Katie Towner did more recently, but I think someone else did, at the beginning too, beginning of our first public hearing.
Elaine, do we have like an idea of how many biotech businesses we have in town right now?
I don't know.
Is it like 3 or is it 10 or
I
is it?
don't know. I don't.
Nothing, no, does anybody have any idea how many biotech?
It's
I
under
think it's more
10.
than 3.
What's that?
I'd say it's probably between 3 and 10.
3 and 10, okay.
Okay. So, That's a good question. Should
Well,
we?
it's, you know, by.
Shouldn't we look at all businesses, encourage all businesses, or the businesses that we want to
Choose,
encourage high value? I think biotechnology is assumed to be high value before it goes through our matrix, And that's probably why people brought it up.
Maybe we should just put it on our matrix and address it that way.
Okay. It's on there in a sense, under laboratories and research centers, but because we weren't defining everything under manufacturing and office, we're defining it by use rather than by industry, essentially.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So this is looking at it from a different angle by a specific industry. And then the only suggestion that people had come up with was Katie's suggestion of allowing level 3 by right instead of special permit. I'm not necessarily in favor of that. I think special permit is pretty appropriate for getting up to level 3.
Or 4 or 5.
Or 4 or 5.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think that because we lack an economic development officer in town, a lot of this stuff is not really zoning based, but I mean, I have great suggestions for this, because right now, our town website has tabs for government and residents, but there's no tab for business. So it's screaming out loud that we don't have any resources for businesses. And if I'm going to bring a company to a town, that's one of the first places I stop, is the town website. And I look for that information. We just don't have it.
It's a good point.
I mean, it's an easy thing, it's an easy fix. It's also that because we don't have a Department of Economic Development, if there is somebody who's supposed to be the catch-all for, is that you, Elaine, at this point? I mean, I know you have so many jobs. I feel badly, but, since we don't have the catch-all person at the staff level who is the Development of Economic Development for our town, who typically takes the call from a company that's looking to relocate?
Sometimes they call me, sometimes they call other people. Sometimes if people are looking for space, I'll refer them to the Chamber of Commerce because we have a memorandum of understanding with them regarding economic development. So it's a combination of things.
Right, so what happens is that, so if, in a lot of the cases, there's an administrative person at a company who's been tasked with, go find out who it is we talk to at that particular town. And in other town websites, it's very clear who you talk to. Our town website doesn't do that.
So all of these things, not downplaying your suggestions itself, but they're all in the master plan too.
But it's not zoning.
It's not zoning,
No.
no, but it is something that we can encourage to be taken on elsewhere. And, but they are excellent suggestions, and just because they're in the master plan doesn't mean, I'm downplaying it at all, because it's just, the point is that they're still needed, despite the fact that they're in the master plan as suggestions to implement, and we haven't implemented them.
I would like to suggest that perhaps we have a page on our website that talks to buildings that are available, and maybe some blurb about, well, this is our high-tech, biotech, area where a lot of these kinds of uses have been clustered. So that, again, it's a flag saying, if you're part of this world, we've got a place for you. And this is the area where we have the property that makes sense for you. And then the other resource could be that there are a list of brokers or owners that whoever is the person who would coordinate it, if it's the Chamber of Commerce, that there's a person there that has the list of owners and brokers that are aligned with the properties in town. Because like right now, it's not very clear we've got anything available in town. And just in a general way, in other towns, I wouldn't necessarily go to the Chamber of Commerce looking for that being the resource, even though we have the memorandum of understanding, because I did read that. There really is a different hat for what we're talking about here. And the chamber is a great, place to network and get ideas and meet some people and organize your business. But if you're from outside of town and you don't have time to go do that, it's a totally different animal. And this is totally we need to get the steps to get our business moved into this community.
Also, the permitting streamlining that we were going to talk about as a specific item, is certainly part of this category. Things to improve, to encourage businesses. Anything else from the chamber?
That's very clear in the master plan.
Very clear, yeah. Anything else from the master plan that we want to mention here? But all of these are very good points.
So
Is there anything else from the chamber that has come up that isn't in the master plan?
We're in the process of trying to get final approval to do a video brochure for the town, so that at least there will be some place for somebody to click on and take a look at that. So we're working closely with Norman to try to get his final approval on that.
And
No, I was wondering to encourage biotechnology or any businesses, not just new businesses, to help them, the ones already in town, grow. Give them incentives in the zoning side that if you're already established here, if you have good standing with us, employ people from town and stuff like that, we'll help you get more space and grow here instead of grow somewhere else.
yeah, that's
I
a good
agree
idea.
with that idea over 43D.
Yeah,
Okay, because the 43D is sort of a blanket.
no, that's a good point. So really, the idea would be not a specifically different thing here, but all of these other suggestions, but also market those specifically to established businesses in town who are in need of growth, or wish to grow. Yeah, okay. Anything else specifically to established businesses that they would need in particular that would be different than new businesses? Target items to current business. Okay. That list up there fairly comprehensive for what we're talking about? Okay, what's the next item on brainstorming?
Additional ways to protect open space.
Space. So 2 suggestions from the public were
Increasing minimum lot sizes in residential districts and amending zoning to protect large open parcels.
Is there not a problem with the state in terms of setting the lot sizes to be such a size that it's classified as
Snob zoning, yeah.
If you get too big.
Is there a definition of what's too big?
I think you have to worry if it's, say, upwards of 2 to 5 acres. Definitely anything beyond 5 acres is probably, you're gonna have to justify that. It all depends on how you justify it, what's the area like, is it something special? I think you have to be careful when you get pretty big.
I thought it was anything over 2 acres.
You have to worry, you have to work harder.
and we are
That's
currently
better, I thought it was 1.
The
No,
largest lot size now is 1.38 acres, so 60,000 square feet.
The largest
minimum lot
we
size.
have? Okay.
That's the agricultural
All
district.
right, largest minimum
It's 1.38 acres.
in agricultural district.
It's a good sized lot.
Okay. I know, having looked at this last year in Zach a little bit, that there's other towns that have a lot larger lot sizes, minimums, than we do.
So in,
Not that, not.
some of those towns don't have sewer, so they require,
Yeah,
okay, I mean, our town is half sewer, half non-sewer. And some of those towns have really poor soils, which is the other thing. It's hard to go in that direction to protect open space. I mean, other towns have tried it, and it literally, it falls on all these issues that come into play.
yeah. And there's also the point of view of not making larger lot sizes, making smaller lots with the houses so that there is actually open space. It's not just open private space in your yard, but there's actual open space for people to use other than you. So it kind of goes against that principle, which at least some people have been trying to steer some zoning towards for the last several years.
Open space, landscape.
Yeah, the open space, yeah, so the subdivisions and things like that, so.
Plus your roads, when you're doing it that way, your roads are so much less than they would have to be if everyone was sitting on 2 acres of land and you had to go from driveway to driveway.
Okay, and the other idea proposed by someone in the public was related to the current large, working with the owners of current large plots of land.
How so? Like let's just take the Hopkinton Country Club, because that came up. There's an operating business there, so the value of the land is, above straight raw land. And how are we going to communicate with the owners of Hopkinton Country Club that we want their land if they're no longer going to operate there? I don't know. I mean, it would be an expensive proposition.
Yeah, it was the same thing with the YMCA and Laborers Training Center.
Yeah.
It's 2 large parcels that are currently operating those sites.
And I don't know if there was any more description from Amy when she suggested this. Do you remember?
I don't recall. I wasn't at the hearing.
Yeah, Amy just said that she was sitting there, she just said, look, we really want to try to protect this land so that it's not going to be developed into subdivisions, but it's really difficult because these are private properties.
Right.
I don't,
Well, if it's in chapter 61, 61A or 61B, the town has the right of first refusal
Right.
if it's being sold for development. So the town could decide it's going to be more robust in its purchasing of these when they become available.
So both of those properties are under chapter 61?
They are.
The golf course is not,
I think it is, isn't it?
is it?
still?
I think it is.
How could it?
Maybe that's something we should look at, is
61.
Why
chapter
are they paying
61
tenants?
lands.
I mean, paying taxes rather. They're paying, don't they pay regular taxes?
You still pay regular taxes, but I think the
Get a
value is
discount.
lower.
Well, I know the discount's huge though, if you're in an agricultural designation. If you're operating a business, I would think that you'd be taxed at a regular rate. I don't know.
The rate is the same for everyone, it's just the value that's different.
Right. That's what I meant.
Okay, so we can look into the country club and whether or not it's under that chapter
61A.
61A.
It
you
is,
just Google
it is
that?
61B,
61B.
61B.
which is recreation.
Chap.
Carol, when you said both of those properties, well, you weren't including the golf course. What was the other one? The YMCA and?
Laborers
Laborers
training.
training.
Oh, okay, all right.
Well, there's 61A and there's 61B.
And then 61. So one is forest, so 61 is forest, 61A is agriculture, and 61B is recreation.
So, yeah.
Oh,
The
okay.
Terry property was 61.
C.
B. Forestry.
Forestry.
That's 61 then.
61, I think is what, well, it might have started just as 61A. I don't know. Used to be farmland. And it became a forest, so I'm
So
not
we
really
need to
sure what
look
it's
it up
classified
for
as.
country club, the country club.
Culture and recreation. 61A.
Is there any
B.
desire to, I don't know, I don't even know if there's a way to do this, but set aside more money for, for potential future right of first refusal?
That's that other committee?
Yeah.
It's, we have funds for that. We put away CPC money for that.
And we still have a fund, before CPC existed, we created the Open Space Preservation Commission with an open space preservation fund, and was used to purchase land before CPC, but that fund is still there. It just has
there
a
any
very
money in
low, has a low balance now. That's how we purchased the Cameron property with that. Cameron Woods.
CPC, right?
That was
It's off Wood
before
Street.
community preservation.
Right, okay. So the CPC fund and the Open Space Preservation Fund. And it's a matter of town allocating monies to those funds and not them spending them on something else.
Well, they changed that a couple of years ago. The percentage going to open space used to be substantially larger than it is now, and now we're taking a large portion of that CPC money and building bathrooms and and stuff on Fruit Street as opposed to just buying open space. And that percentage was changed at town meeting.
And it also, because there was a change in the law too, so it allowed it to be spent on recreation, active recreation where it didn't originally.
Oh.
And there's
Well,
a discretionary portion.
Maybe
in-
there's a way to just be able to communicate to the property owners that the town would not want to see those developed into subdivisions in the future. Maybe that's one way, just to start off with a discussion with them and say, look, you know, we'll try to figure out a plan. Should you need to sell this in the future, we'll try and figure out a plan how to acquire it.
My personal opinion is the only way to do that is to change the funding, because people are people are very happy to spend CPC money because it's really free money.
Right.
And if 95% of the free money is going to recreation, they're happy to spend it that way. If there was a big pool of money for land
Right.
that could not be spent on anywhere but land, then the money would be spent for that.
She's right.
That's what I was
But
thinking.
if you're gonna go to town meeting, when you look at the Weston Nursery property, that property was not expensive. And we
No.
could have bought that property.
We can't look back.
No, but I know,
We can't look
I know we can't look back, but if at that point we had the funds available to do it, we would have done it.
Right.
But at the time that we were looking at it, there was a cash outlay required by the citizens to buy that property, and that's not gonna happen. So and just my opinion, I'm not stating fact here or anything, but if you wanna set up some sort of preservation so that you can get those lands as they become available to keep them from development, then you have to set up a funding mechanism now so that you have the financial resources to
When they
do
come.
that when the time comes.
Right. That's the
I
only way, that's the only way that's gonna happen. to
Is the
preserve
Open
that
Space Preservation Fund already set up, and we just, if that is a goal,
It exists.
so it would just be,
It's,
take to town meeting a vote to readjust percentages?
Well, that would be, it would be putting it into a fund that's only for open space.
Right.
And
But
so
I thought I heard
CPC,
that,
which is recreation.
CPC, it would be separate. So town meeting.
so maybe I misunderstood, I thought I heard that money was adjusted, so that less went to the open space fund
That's CPC.
and more to CPC fund. I thought that's what I heard.
No, it's all CPC funding, it's just, it's
Oh,
broken
okay.
up into pots,
I see, I see,
and they made this pot considerably smaller.
I see.
And made these other pots bigger.
Is that a decision made by the CPC board, or was that decided at a vote?
It was a town meeting vote, but it's
town
not a
meeting vote?
zoning vote. It's
No,
a
right.
general.
And it's,
Right.
and then we have this separate fund that's not CPC, that's Open Space Preservation Fund that pre-existed it. It's still there.
And that's the one that you
So
said
town
is
meeting
very
could
small.
appropriate money to it if it wanted to.
So that would be an easier fix than coming up with the whole fund.
Well, getting money at town meeting for no apparent reason is not easier.
No, but then you bring up the people who are saying, look, we want open space, and this is what, this is the only mechanism we can use.
Maybe it makes sense to go to the open space or the CPC people
Yes.
and talk to them about maybe rethinking the allocation. That might be,
That doesn't require a town meeting.
no. Ultimately, to change it, it would require a town meeting, but the conversation doesn't require a town meeting.
But the allocation does require a town meeting.
The allocation does.
Yes, and Elaine probably knows off the top of her head, but part of it is passive recreation, part of it is active recreation, part of it is discretionary, part of it is historical.
Just looking up I don't think that we specify in the bylaw, so I think that's the statute that says, and you probably could, when you're voting at town meeting, you probably could adjust the amounts, as long as you're providing the minimum in each of those buckets, which is like 10%.
Yeah.
You can put the other wherever you discretionary.
Okay. I think this is enough for tonight on this topic. I think we can at least have this to refer to and potentially take some suggestions to CPC. And it's not a zoning issue specifically, but obviously open space and use of the land. It's related, so.
Maybe through the planning board, we could talk to Gary about taking it to
Sure.
open space.
Okay, I'm gonna move, you're gonna be able to save this and send it to yourself. I basically just made a second sheet on the Excel spreadsheet, so.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Elaine, by the way, while you were out of the room, right at the beginning, we decided to vote on the minutes.
Okay.
So,
Any changes?
yes, there was minor corrections from
Major
Tad.
corrections.
Major corrections from Tad that he will give to you. Oh, okay. That Carol just gave to you. It was moved by Carol, seconded by Tad. All in favor? Aye. Yeah. Okay, so our final item on the agenda tonight is to do a preliminary discussion on expedited permitting. And we have received some information about Chapter 43D, and for the benefit of the public, because I know everybody here has read all the information from Elaine. Chapter 43D is a state law that we can opt into. It would apply to lots of, I shouldn't say lots, 50,000 square feet of gross floor area for development or redevelopment. It is specifically lots that have been specified by the town and then meet the criteria and are okayed by a certain interagency permitting board. And then the benefits are that it can go through, first of all, it's advertised as available and part of this 43D on a state website. And it requires us to issue a decision on these within 180 days. And that's broadly, there's lots of other details, of course. And that's certainly one option, but obviously it only applies to some big properties. And it does need to go through town meeting, so it's something that we can have people start to look at. Are there specific properties that we would want to do this with? And then we can go to the selectmen and go through town meeting to have them approved for this state law, and then it would go through that process. Benefits certainly are, it would at least get the name Hopkinton on this state website as business friendly. So there's something in that. It doesn't address business development in general. For lots of different areas, for smaller size properties or anything like that. There's something about grants and so on that it makes it priority consideration for. I don't know much about these grants. Mass Works Infrastructure Program grants, brownfields remediation assistance, and other financing. Priority consideration. I assume that's for the business that would come in to take on this $50,000 square foot property, at least? Or would it be for the town specifically?
Municipal infrastructure to serve the property.
Okay, so it could be a grant to help us change infrastructure to serve that property, and therefore could be a benefit to other properties. Okay? So, that's the benefits. That's just one thing we can look at in terms of expedited permitting. Other things we can look at, I sent you a PDF that just has guidelines from an organization to specific towns on expediting our own permitting process. So doing it internally. Obviously, this is a long-term process, but it's something that we can consider. And it will involve more than just us, but it has to start somewhere. So that's another possibility. I haven't read that document yet, that guideline document.
The one that you sent?
The one that, that I sent like a couple hours ago.
Oh, I didn't see it, so.
It was just supplemental to what Elaine sent.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
My recollection or my interpretation of why we are looking at this is for the Franklin Road property in particular, and the concern for that.
Could be why it came up.
And maybe my recollection is incorrect, but in reading this, it concerns me somewhat. I don't want to see just haphazard development on that property. If that's our concern, is that particular property, that we might be better served to actually just look at the zoning for the professional office park and review that to see if that's really what we want in there before we start trying to get people to develop in there. Maybe we want to look at the uses in there and see if that's really what we want, or if maybe we want to look at it as a location for a possible medical facility, or just go through the uses that are in there and see if that's still at this point really what we want, and look at the other use possibilities that we have and see if they would be a better use of that property. So rather than going this route, I would prefer to review the professional office park bylaw in itself and really take a close look at what that allows and what it doesn't allow and what we should have it allow.
And so my recollection was that this came up because of South Street. But to your point on 71 Franklin, I did talk to the broker handling the property this evening, and he's a resident here in Hopkinton. He does a lot of work here, and he told me that they've really been unsuccessful in attracting someone for the building because of the location. It's not really a commercial location. And he said that the highest and best use for the property would be to be redeveloped as residential. Now, it's an office park, it's in the middle of nowhere, it's the only other way I think we could attract commercial use there is if we did have some infrastructure, i.e. electric bus route, which I mentioned before. But, you know, even that is going to be hard to attract somebody. They did mass mailings to schools, hospitals, and other kinds of like uses for the building. And they have been unsuccessful. The property's been on the market for a little under a year, which is not uncommon for something this size. But I think through the next year, there'll be a determination of whether or not this is ever going to be an office space.
Needs to be destination.
Well, you know, I suggested that like BC did a retreat center, like the Warren Center is a, you know, that's that, but a lot of the colleges and universities are feeling pressure financially, and then the ones that don't really want to come out in the woods.
Right.
It's like, it's like one or the other right now. So, I mean, you know, it could change, I suppose. I mean, could get lucky. There could be someone from, you know, another country who wants to do a school here or something like that. But that broker is very, very much aware of the pros and the cons of that property in that very specific location.
Okay, good.
All right.
Thank you.
With regard to 43.
So, just to be clear then, you're saying 43D is not the answer to that property?
No.
From what you're hearing from the broker?
No. 43D on South Street, you know, it could be an option. I didn't realize, I didn't see this link before. Carol just brought this, but the fact that this would allow us for a state grant that could get us those electric buses, that could be something to, you know, think about. I'm not fully sold on 43D for South Street, but I am seeing this and I'm saying to myself, well, you know, I would like to talk to other towns and understand how they have the pros and the cons of this. My only experience was in Uxbridge, and it was, you know, you can't confuse this with opportunity zones, which the state's been talking about lately, because the opportunity zones tend to be in poverty areas and low income. You know, this is different, but it's, you know, I think that a lot of towns go to this when they have those conditions.
Right. Oh,
all right. Okay. So I don't know. Like I said, I would want to go and get more information from other towns to see what their experience is.
Elaine, is there anything easily accessible about the success of 43D in various communities in the state?
No, we could do some research on that.
Okay.
But I just remember from the day this idea was brought up that they said that there is a lot of neighboring towns which has adopted this and we are late to the game. I just remember that part of the argument that was presented. I don't know if I haven't, again, I don't know the ins and outs of the whole thing, but I remember somebody mentioning that when they proposed it.
So I'm on the MassGov site that lists the 43D properties. And I flipped through, Ashland has one or two, Holliston has none, Milford has none. Westboro has the insane hospital.
None.
I'm sorry?
You're saying none or one?
None, zero.
Okay.
Westford has the former insane hospital, which I imagine has some of the same problems as the insurance place out there. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And the towns that do have one or two properties, I know nothing about what 100 to 104 Lowell Road is in North Reading, but it's not a ton of them. And I don't think that we are standing out as a town not participating in our own little region, just as I glance at it.
I think it's geared towards sites, so I think, you know, you'd know it if you needed it. I think
Obviously,
you have
yeah,
something
because it would be,
jump out.
and also, you know, a town might have it on there, and then when it's sold, it goes off and they don't have another site on there.
Right.
You know, or it's not sold and they decide to take it off and another site doesn't go on there. So, you know, I'm sure there's some flow back and forth. What is your impression of it?
Well, I plan on talking to the Economic Development Council at our meeting on Friday to see if anybody's aware of a parcel on South Street or Lumber Street that would lend itself to this.
Yeah.
The other part of it is, you identify a parcel. It doesn't turn the whole town into a 43D. It's just like, I mean, the Lanza buildings would have been gee, they haven't moved in a long time, maybe we'll try this, but now we've got, Lake Farm is interested. I mean, Lycan is interested in that, so I don't know if there are other parcels that might lend itself to that, but I think it's worthy of a conversation to say, can somebody think of a site that this might help? And if so, then I think I would like to take it to another level of consideration. I don't think we should adopt it or not adopt it on the face of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that this, in terms of expedited permitting in general, it's just one thing to do. I also think we need to keep in mind that it takes a while to even get into the process, because we do have to take it to town meeting after parcels have been identified. Take it to town meeting, and the selectmen undoubtedly have to, approve it somewhere along the way. And, and then it goes to the state board that approves it. So that's another 60 days past town meeting. And then it can come up onto their website and start being promoted. Obviously, there's other steps that we'd need to do to be able to meet the 180-day decision points and so on. But it's obviously only one way to address just economic development in general, and do we need to expedite our permitting process in other ways? So.
Did Lycan take 97 and 99 South Street, or just 97?
97.
So is 99 still vacant? Okay. And how long since Lonza left? Was it 2 years?
Longer, but they've been paying their rent until recently.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I mean, the world of commercial real estate works at a very slow pace.
How long was Lanza there for? I don't know. Did they have a TIF?
They did, and I want to say 2004, something like that.
Quite a while ago.
Yeah.
It was just yesterday.
So it would be great if the next meeting you'd come back to us with, what the general thoughts were from the Economic Development Council, and if you can gather any information.
Well, this is all the vacant parcels we have for buildings and.
So it has square footage and everything.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
And obviously, it's for new development as well as redevelopment, so even if a building doesn't have 50,000 square feet, if a business is looking to have 50,000 square feet or more, yeah, it would apply.
Well, so this is only the stuff that's advertised on CoStar and LoopNet. This is not a private owner that may have land that doesn't want to advertise it.
Yeah.
Just of curiosity, do you know if does anything stay available for more than 5 years?
I haven't seen that in this town.
Okay, no, because the reason why I asked was the permit, if you get a permit to a location, it goes up to 5 years, so I was just trying to see, like, it can ever, like.
Yeah, I mean, I think to lease a building is 18 months and for any building, literally. If it's gone vacant and no one's paying rent and the landlord wants to do a deal and all those things align, but the contracts are complicated. It's a lot of infrastructure for the company to move and stuff like that, so it's not like moving in a house. People don't get this. It's like it takes time to move these things. So I don't know. We don't have that much vacant. I know that there's a concern that we might have some vacancies coming up, which when Marlboro got a developer interested in the HP buildings and the Fidelity buildings, is because there was like 1 million square feet that was vacant all of a sudden. And that was the impetus for them to start working on those buildings and trying to attract the tenants to the buildings. And that's why they have TJX and Whole Foods and a variety of other people there.
Okay.
So I just wanted to say about 43D, when I looked through it, and I don't understand a lot of it, but what caught my eye, being the Concom rep here and my wife being on the Historical Commission, is part of it is if the commissions don't render a decision within 180 days, that means accept it.
Yep.
And so then I tried to follow the flow chart. I've been on ComCom for about a year and a half, so I feel like a rookie still. But I would love to show it to the veterans on the committee to say, how restraining is this 180 days? Because it really scared me that if I wanted to try to put something over on the community, I could make my deadline right at the end every single time, perhaps, and then it makes the 180 days difficult to meet. And then you get approved by no decision, and that frightened me a bit.
No, but the requirement is that the applicant has to meet the deadline set by the governing boards.
Yeah.
So you
Right.
you can't just delay, and then,
The timeline I read seemed to say you have 21 days to submit this. And then the board has a certain amount of time. If the applicant submits on day 21, that makes it harder for the board to then meet their, so I thought, perhaps, I don't know. And with the Historical Commission, if it was a property that included destruction of a historical property, I don't know how their power to delay demolition 6 months fits in with that 180-day window. I don't know how any of that works.
Okay.
But it gave me pause.
Yep. So that, you know, for one thing, we would have an ability to only choose a property that doesn't
Sure.
fall within historic districts, but there's still the other committees to
Right,
consider,
right, right.
you know, so, you know, all of that, very important to look at.
I will go to
I feel that-
ComCom and
yeah.
show them
Yeah,
what was
that'd
sent
be
and say,
great.
you guys who've been here longer than I, please tell me, is this something that we at ComCom would?
Because we need to look at all the requirements in parallel, I think, to looking for a property or properties that may be applicable, but look at those requirements and see whether or not that's something that we can make work. And that's, you know, it is gonna involve other committees and other discussions. But I also feel like the other documents that we have that are not related to 43D, but, you know, I just happened, the link that I found was in that 43D document guidelines, but it just refers to expedited permitting in general. And, you know, so
We
we
could
can look
call
at
some
that.
kind of permitting process expedited, but
We
we've set up
can,
the,
just for Huffington,
right,
yeah.
we set up the boundaries or whatever
Yeah.
for it, right?
Yep, exactly. So I'd like to look at that as well. I know, I feel like I'm, you know, assigning action items, and obviously, we all have day jobs and lives and so on, but do what you can to look over that material. The spreadsheet, the matrix, will, you know, if Elaine, you can email it to me tomorrow, I'll make some of the modifications that we talked about but didn't make, and then I'll send it out to everybody right away, so you'll have the next month to look at it, and then at our next meeting, we'll finalize that. And then if you can also take a glance at the expedited permitting guidelines and some of the other action items that we talked about related to 43D and that. There's also a bunch of flow charts that were part of the link to the Google Docs that Elaine had. So any of the smaller ones I'll email to you, but it might be several different emails. So it's just supplemental to some of the 43D that's, you know, easy to look at if you hadn't had a chance to look at the Google Docs link. So, okay. All right, so we approved the minutes already. The committee work program, we just modified kind of the way it's laid out, just to make it easier to review. But right now, our agenda items aren't coming directly from that, because we're doing this big picture stuff first. So I'm not gonna review that in detail right now. Our next meeting, as we discussed at our last meeting, our next meeting won't be until March because of the special town meeting and the winter break, the week of the 18th, and other town committee meetings that interfere. So March 4th is next. All right.
Do we have another date after March 4th?
I was about to say, do we want to book one?
March 18th should be the next one. I don't see any other conflicts. You wanna
I will
check?
not be here, but
Okay.
I bet you most other people can be.
March 18th then?
March 18th. 7 PM. I'm gonna put it at 7, not 7:30. All right. Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second? So moved.
Thank you. All in favor? All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstentions. Okay, thank you.
The Monday after St. Patrick's Day is worse than